button, and all I had to do was pull the button out, and we were back, right? No problem. TV's not broken. Yay us! Panic solved. But the kids weren't supposed to touch the TV. They were all very young at the time, so we lined them up. You know how you do when you're in the army. Did you touch the TV? And my oldest son, no, I didn't touch the TV. Honesty in his face, right? He clearly did not touch the TV. Asked my oldest daughter. Well, I only had one daughter at the time. And I said, did you touch the TV? No, I didn't touch the TV. A complete honesty in the face. And then I look at Christopher and I said, okay, well, that's who I'm talking about. And I said, did you touch the TV? No, I didn't touch the TV. Guilt. Just, the way he said that was so much guilt. The other two children looked at him like, you just gave it away that you did touch it, because that's how he answered it. And then just to make clear, I looked at him and I said, which button didn't you touch? And he pointed right at that button and he said, that's the button I didn't touch. Yeah, obviously. I wouldn't have asked that of a person that I thought would have understood that would have identified them as the culpable person. And this totally clueless. He went right with it and he said, that's the button I didn't touch. And this is when he's a toddler. He was also late picking up language, etc. So that's something I'm familiar with, having raised a child that we thought if we gave him all the attention and all the love and extra rich environment and all sorts of help and so on, that he would be able to triumph over this initial difficulty. Well, fetal alcohol is something that affects the hardware or wetware, if you use that as your description of our brain, right? And so at least at this point, we don't have a solution to how we can repair the damage, the physical damage. It's not something that can be helped with learning or manipulatives, we tried the whole litany of those things, and the science in how to work with that today kind of agrees with this, that unless we find some way of going in and actually repairing the parts that were lost or never able to grow, we were not going to be able to fix that. But the issue with humor affects, of course, people that have had brain damage in other ways. And so it can be, I don't remember the guy who had the spike run through his head. That's the one that everybody brings up, if you're talking about the Anthony Damasio and his brain studies. He's in his 90s now, I think, Antonio Damasio. But of all the different books you're reading about, their growing ability to understand how the brain works and so on, that you can see which parts of the brain function to do what things. The connections when people have different parts of their brain are damaged, and then you can find out what things they're not able to do. So when we have brain damage, we can associate that with the kinds of problems that they're likely to have.
Actually, I have a lot of experience with that. I went through TBI treatments, trying to figure out what parts of my brain were damaged, and they actually test different cognitive areas throughout the whole thing. It's an intelligence test, is actually what it is. But what they're looking for is severe divergence in one area compared to all of it. It's for a couple areas. It's a long process.
God bless you, by the way. The other end of this is Alzheimer's. I have trouble remembering the name of that one.
Yeah,
Alzheimer's.
We used to call it old timers when we were kids.
That's actually supposed to be a joke. When I can't remember the name of Alzheimer's, it's supposed to be funny. I don't actually have trouble with that yet. I have gotten to the point where I'm beginning to have name loss. You know, it's not lost. It just takes me 10 minutes to remember who I'm trying to remember. You know, and you know, if I'm trying to remember the lines from a song or something, you know, I might get stuck, and I'm like, oh, what's the? And then 5 minutes later, when it's too late to actually have used it, that's when I remember the rest of the lines or something. How much poetry can you remember? You know, 'twas brillig and the slithy toves did gyre and gimble in the wave, all mimsy where the borough groves and the mom rats out grave, etc. But so there's other kinds of brain damage and aging. Whether that affects humor, I haven't learned yet, but I imagine that it will. That at a certain point, an aging brain is not going to be able. So humor is something that requires a certain ability on the part of the people that are practicing the humor and laughing at it. But yes, you can read jokes in here. He has jokes of specific types that he wants to discuss and why they're funny. So that's interesting. So I highly recommend looking at that. But I also recommend listening to individuals. So last night I went to Jim Gaffigan and picked. Okay, so that's really a short one. This is the dinner. He's at the Al Smith dinner. Adam Smith? Al Smith. See, there's an example of my memory. It's Al Smith. Adam Smith is the economist. Sorry about that.
You said Al Smith earlier.
I did say Al Smith?
I wrote it down.
All right, then I must have got it right. Let's see. Well, I'll click on this.
Now, if you know, I'm normally a fat guy. But since I've lost all this weight, now I'm just arrogant. People, they won't even say anything to me. They'll just go to my wife and ask, is Jim okay? Because to them, it's more likely that I'm sick than I would ever have any self-discipline. I know I complain a lot about my family, but they've ruined my life. You ever notice in commercials for alcohol, people are always laughing and having a good time? I just like to see one print ad that shows some expressionless dad sitting alone at a kitchen table with a bottle of booze. My wife was like, don't gaslight me. And I was like, I've never heard that term before. She was like, you've never heard of gaslighting? And I was like, I don't think anyone on this planet has heard of gaslighting. You might be going crazy. I freely admit my wife has it harder, much harder, but this whole thing is kind of her fault. These children didn't come out of my body. In a way, they're not even my kids.
So maybe that. So, is that funny? Was he funny?
It was moments.
What kind of fallacious argument would you say that was?
Which one? Which bit?
All of them. He's using just one type of. Well, this is my interpretation. He's using one type of fallacy for all of it. In fact, that's one of the things I would argue, that in general, when you find a particular comedian and you like their sense of humor, that all their jokes use one particular fallacy that they use over and over and over and over again. In this case, he's using analogies, and his analogies are outside the perimeter of a successful analogy. I mean, that's really something we, remember, analogy is where you're, ANA is the Greek for preface for re in Latin. I mean, there is no English prefix because English is a hodgepodge of a mixture of languages, and we use the Latin RE when we say repeat, and we use the the Greek, when we say analogy, right? So what we end up with is, if you go and you look at synonyms, you'll find that our Greek-rooted words have a comparable meaning in Latin-rooted words. And that's one of the neat things about English, that we have these roots in both Greek and Latin and German, Anglo-Saxon, and you can get all gung-ho over it because we have Chinese words that we use, Russian words. If you're a grunt, if you were in the middle, I don't know who got it first. Did the Russians say grunt, which means an infantryman, or did we get it, because we grunt when we're humping it? I don't know. That's we have no clear way of determining in the past, where these vocabulary words are clearly originated first. But no, I would say his humor is based on analogies that are say, they're not really my children. Well, what he, of course, is implying is that since she's the one that did all the work, basically making them, they're not, in a sense, his children, they're just hers. Which, of course, is not true. And that's why we laugh, because we realize that's not an appropriate analogy, right? So he's missing the point there. Let me get there's longer ones. I don't know which of these would be the best to grab. I didn't want to use the Al Smith dinner one because those are harsh. Those were mean and rotten, and that's because he was hired to do them, because that's the nature of the dinner. Let's see what we get here.
Availability is the best ability, so I push my body to its limit. That's
But
why
think
I
about how
I wish I had an excuse, like I had to gain all this weight for a movie. There's no movie. If you saw me eat, you would think there were multiple movies. Are they doing a live action Shrek? This guy's gonna be perfect. Wearing my shirt untucked, the untucked shirt, the fat man's last hurrah. Next stop, Momo. You might see a guy with his shirt untucked.
So can we see that that's an analogy? Am I right? Remember, this is my interpretation of what makes him funny.
But analogous to what?
Well, we know that by having his shirt untucked, hey,
Does he just mean skinny guy to fat guy? Is that what we mean?
well,
That's
he's
comparison.
he's making fat jokes at his own expense.
Right.
And that works. I mean, you're not supposed to make fun of people, but you can make fun of yourself, right? And so he's making fun of himself. Fluffy does this too. I don't know if you're familiar with Fluffy, but Fluffy is obese, and he makes a lot of self-deprecating jokes about himself because of his own weight. And we all can laugh at that. But how do the jokes work, right? And the question I think is answered by saying this is an analogy, because as he goes on to point out, that, okay, that's a description of how a fatter person can cover their shape by having a drape, right, that hides it. But the muumuu is next. Well, we know what a muumuu is. It's it's a big dress, that people can wear that is very casual, very relaxing. I think they are all from Hawaii, isn't it? Isn't that where
I don't know.
muumuus are from? But in any case, it's not that it's that funny, So it's not that radically outside of the perimeters of an analogy, but I think it's within this, so
It's like, oh, is he in a hurry? Is he going casual? You should know, someone very close to that man saw him with his shirt tucked in and said, don't do that. That's visually unpleasing. You look better not fully dressed. The untucked shirt, it's like the male wonder bra. There's a surprise
that's an
underneath.
analogy.